Imagine a galaxy on the edge of collapse. 47 years of bloodshed, billions lost, and two superpowers ready to ignite the kind of war that erases star systems. And yet, the moment the diplomatic doors opened, everything stopped. Because the ambassador didn't walk in with an army, we walked in with a human. One bodyguard, one mug of coffee. And in just 3 minutes, 3 impossible world-shaking minutes, an entire war fell silent. Why? Because every species in the room suddenly realized humans don't need weapons to be terrifying. They just need to talk. If stories like this spark your curiosity, hit that like button. It really helps. Subscribe so you don't miss the next HFY tale, and share it with a fellow sci-fi fan if you want to blow their mind today. All right, buckle in. This is going to get wild. The summons came at 3 o'clock Galactic Standard, an hour when even the most seasoned diplomats preferred silence, darkness, and a warm cup of serenity. But on this night, Ambassador Vexthera stepped into the Galactic Council chamber to find 17 species all talking at once, waving limbs, tentacles, fins, and whatever biological equipment they possessed. It looked less like a political assembly and more like a panicked cosmic bazaar. The Zephyrian crystalline war had dragged on for nearly half a century. Entire star systems were scarred. Trade routes were dead. Peace treaties collapsed faster than unstable singularities. And tonight they were out of time. Planet-cracking weapons were back on the table. Not even Vexthera, who'd served 347 years without losing her composure once, could pretend this wasn't bad. Council Chairman Blocksnaff, whose species unfortunately wheezed like a collapsing air pump, greeted her with the desperation of someone hoping a miracle might fall from the sky. We have a situation. That was diplomatic language for we are about to die horribly. Let me guess, Vexthera said. The peace talks collapsed again. The Zephyrians won't release the mines. The crystallines want reparations, and everyone expects me to pull a miracle out of thin air. No, Blocksnaff replied. It's worse. They had 72 hours to fix everything or watch 2 civilizations go extinct. But what truly froze Vexthera's hearts was the Council's solution. We hired you the best bodyguard in the galaxy, Blocksnaff said proudly. She perked up. A battle monk? A super soldier? A telepathic titan? Better, he said. We hired a human. The chamber went silent, then erupted into chaos. A human. From the deathworld. They eat poison for fun. I heard they jump off cliffs on purpose. Vexthera closed her 4 eyes. You want me to negotiate a galaxy-saving peace treaty with a human following me around? His name is Jake Murphy, Blocksnaff said, and his rates were very reasonable. Reasonable rates. For a species legendary for surviving environments that killed starships. Jake was waiting in the Council's reception area, sitting casually, legs crossed, eating something between 2 pieces of bread. A sandwich, he called it. Whatever it contained was powerful enough to set off the room's air purifiers. When he saw Vexthera, he brightened, stood, and extended a hand. I'm Jake, your bodyguard. Awesome to meet you. His face moved. His lips stretched upward. Teeth, rows of sharp, human teeth, were suddenly visible in a gesture humans called smiling. Vexthera stared like he'd just handed her an active grenade. A pleasure, she managed. Jake didn't seem dangerous. He seemed cheerful, which, in a human, was somehow even worse. So what's a mission? Jake asked, taking another fearless bite of his sandwich. Someone said it's a peace negotiation. Way cooler than my last job, that's for sure. Vexthera made the mistake of asking, what was your last job? Oh, I was a kindergarten teacher. She nearly fainted. This creature, this apex predator, had been responsible for human children. 5-year-olds. The tiny, untrained versions of the most feared species in the galaxy. Jake continued, unaware he was triggering widespread panic just by existing. Great kids. Tons of energy, though. You turn your back for 2 seconds, and they're climbing walls or sticking things in their mouths. Wild little dudes. Vexthera's brain stared into a void of pure, existential dread. Here was a being who had survived caring for 25 miniature deathworlders at once. Of course, the Council thought he could handle a war zone. You're from Earth, she said quietly. A Class 12 death world. Your planet requires a 17-page waiver to visit. Jake shrugged. Or it's not so bad. Kind of fun if you like adventure. Adventure, she repeated hollowly. Yeah, just last week I went hiking and ran into a mama bear and her cub. Super cute. Vextra's legs locked. Humans called apex predators cute. This was going to end badly. The diplomatic transport ship, Peaceful Endeavor, was equipped with triple-layered shields, redundant everything, and weapons strong enough to vaporize a pirate fleet. It was built to protect ambassadors from enemies, not from their own bodyguard. Jake boarded calmly, admiring the ship like he was stepping onto an amusement ride. Wow, fancy. Way nicer than Earth airplanes. Then he pulled a metal cylinder from his pack. Sardines? Want some? Every crew member backed away, so fast they nearly tripped over each other. Vextra intervened immediately. No one wants sardines. Ever. Jake shrugged again and popped the can open with a blade-equipped human tool, unleashing a smell that made the air systems panic. Between bites, he listened to Vextra explain the war's history. 47 years of hatred, mistrust, and bloodshed. That's rough, he said sympathetically. We had something like that on Earth. 100 Years' War. You'd think someone would have said, maybe we should stop sooner. But hey, humans do weird stuff sometimes. The crew stared in horror. Humans fought for a century and casually called it weird stuff. But Jake wasn't done. Oh, in World War II. Nasty business. 6 years. But now we're friends with basically everyone involved. I was in Japan last year eating sushi with this old guy whose grandpa fought in the war. People get over things eventually. The room froze. This creature casually described global warfare, and then lunch. Then he asked for directions to the gym. 10 minutes later, the reinforced exercise equipment was bent in ways no one could explain. This is going to be fun, Jake said happily. When they reached the Harmony Station, the diplomatic haven built to prevent exactly the kind of catastrophe brewing, the tension was already thick enough to choke. Vextra leaned close to Jake. Please stand in the corner. Quietly. Don't exist too loudly. Got it. Ninja mode. That somehow made her feel worse. The negotiation chamber doors slid open. On one side, General Crixton, 7 feet of armored reptilian fury. On the other, Hive Queen Melodia, glowing like a living prism of weaponized light. 47 years of hatred sat at the table. Vextra tried to begin diplomatically. Tried. Within minutes, they were shouting threats of planetary annihilation, territorial betrayal, and revenge older than most civilizations. Negotiations weren't failing. They were imploding. Vextra felt the galaxy slipping through her fingers. And that was when Jake raised his hand like a student. Sorry, but is there a coffee machine? The room fell silent. Not normal silence, existential silence. General Crixton whispered, "There is a human in the room." Hive Queen Melodia answered, "Why is it smiling?" Both sides panicked. Both sides retreated. Both sides armed fleets. And Jake turned to Vextra, genuinely confused. Did I mess something up? Vextra stared at him. Jake, she whispered, you may be the most dangerous diplomatic tool in galactic history. For the first time in centuries, Ambassador Vextra genuinely considered retiring. Not because she was tired, not because she was old, but because nothing in the Galactic Diplomatic Academy had prepared her for Jake Murphy, human bodyguard. He'd walked into a centuries-old, galaxy-defining peace summit, asked about coffee, and instantly triggered the largest accidental panic attack in political history. Now the entire diplomatic wing was vibrating with alerts. Communication channels were overflowing. Alarm lights strobed across Harmony Station like a rave run by terrified bureaucrats. Vextra stood in the center of the chaos, breathing slowly, trying not to scream. Jake stood beside her sipping the strongest legal stimulant on the station, something that probably wasn't meant to be consumed by humans, and looking mildly concerned. So, they didn't like that I asked about coffee, he asked. Jake, Vextra said carefully, they mobilized fleets. Because I asked about coffee? No, because you exist. Jake blinked. Oh, she wanted to crawl into a black hole. Moments later, the conference room doors slammed open again, nearly flying off their hinges. General Crixton marched in, armored plates rattling, weapons bristling, eyes glowing in unsettling war orange. Behind him, an entire squad of Zephyrian elite soldiers followed with plasma rifles ready. The general pointed a claw at Jake. "Human, explain your intentions." Jake waved cheerfully. To drink coffee and maybe learn about galactic politics?" The Zephyrians murmured among themselves with the same energy of people whispering, "He's disarming us with friendliness." This is how they hunt. Before Jake could dig the hole deeper, the opposite door shattered inward in a burst of radiant shards. Hive Queen Melodia glided in like a shimmering storm, drones humming around her in tight formation. Her voice rang with crystalline intensity. The Zephyrian warmonger mobilized his fleet first. "Lies!" Crixton roared. "You deployed battleships before I even reached the station." "No, you did. You. To Jake, the argument sounded painfully familiar. Two kindergartners insisting the other started it. The room vibrated with rising threat levels. Weapons warmed. Melodia's drones sparked with lethal energy. Zephyrian soldiers tightened formation. Vexthera braced herself. This was how war started, inside small rooms with hurt pride and big egos. And then Jake stepped forward, holding his coffee. "Hey guys," he said casually. "Can I ask a question?" Both sides froze. It wasn't the content of the question. It was the tone. Friendly, calm, like he was about to ask whether they preferred window seats or aisle seats. "You both say the other side mobilized first. But if you think about it, you both mobilized for the same reason." General Crixton glared. "Explain." Jake shrugged. "You saw movement and got scared. They saw movement and got scared. You reacted to each other. You're not being sneaky. You're being careful." Hive Queen Melodia's drones paused mid-hum. General Crixton blinked slowly. In the corner, Vexthera felt her heart skip, because, somehow, the words were working. Jake continued, pacing slightly, swirling his coffee like an old professor delivering a casual lecture. "You've been fighting what, almost 50 years? You must know each other's behavior patterns pretty well. So doesn't it make sense that you both just acted out of instinct?" Melodia tilted her crystalline head. "It is logical." Crixton growled low, but his shoulders relaxed. A defensive response, not aggression. Jake smiled. "Exactly. Look, back home we have this saying, two scared people will always misread each other. And a lot of trouble comes from that." The room stayed quiet. Weapons lowered half an inch. The galaxy held its breath. But tension ran deeper than reaction times. And the next words, innocently delivered, nearly broke the general. "So why are you two afraid of each other anyway?" Jake asked. Both leaders burst into overlapping explanations. "He attacked our minds. They built on sacred land. They stole. They disrespected. It was chaos." Until Jake said, "Wait, hang on." He raised a finger. "Did either of you ask the other what the land was for?" Dead silence. "Ask," Melodia repeated. "Communicate," Crixton echoed. Jake nodded. "Yeah, words." Vexthera held her breath. Melodia's form flickered in mild embarrassment. "We had not considered that path." Crixton scratched his chin with a talon. We never asked because we assumed hostility." Jake beamed. "So the war started because you made assumptions." Nobody spoke. It wasn't that Jake had said anything groundbreaking. It was the fact that two of the galaxy's deadliest leaders suddenly realized they'd been fighting for nearly half a century over a cosmic misunderstanding. Melodia's drones dimmed to a soft hum. Crixton's war armor powered down. Jake took another sip of coffee. "See? Happens all the time with my kindergartners, too. One kid thinks another stole the red crayon. Turns out it rolled off the table." Vexthera wasn't sure who looked more horrified, the Zephyrians, the Crystallines, or herself, because Jake Murphy had just compared a half-century multi-planet war to coloring supplies. And unbelievably, it worked. Still, all was not fixed. Not yet, because even though Jake had cracked open their fear, he hadn't yet solved the real problem. Their fleets were minutes from firing. The room lights dimmed as Harmony Station's warnings intensified. Long-range sensors registered dozens, then hundreds, of Zephyrian and crystalline warships dropping into combat formation. The station trembled as their combined presence warped space. Melodia's voice sharpened. If this conflict is to end, the fleets must receive new orders immediately. Crixton barked something into his comm. They will not stand down unless they see proof of the Confederation's cooperation. Melodia countered instantly. Nor will the Confederation withdraw while your fleet remains armed. Vextera felt panic return. A deadlock. A classic, dangerous one. One wrong call, and the stars outside would burn. Jake looked between them slowly, thoughtfully. Okay, he said finally. Then let's fix this together. Ow, asked Melodia. Jake tapped his comm device. A simple, civilian-grade gadget that looked like a toy compared to galactic technology. I'll talk to both fleets, he said. The room stared. You? Crixton said. You think they will listen? Yeah, Jake replied. I mean, humans are pretty good at yelling loud enough for everyone to hear. He wasn't joking, but the leaders thought he was. Before anyone could protest, he strode to the center of the room, hit the station-wide broadcast frequency, and spoke in the same tone he used when separating arguing children. Hi, this is Jake Murphy, the human. Everybody calm down. Across the galaxy, thousands of soldiers jumped in their seats. Your leaders aren't trying to trick you, he continued. Nobody's attacking anyone. You're reacting out of fear. Lower your weapons and breathe for a second. Zephyrian and crystalline communications erupted with confusion. Jay kept going. And for the record, if I wanted to hurt anyone, I'd have brought my kindergarten class. Those kids fight harder than all of you. Harmony Station went silent. And then, miraculously, ship after ship began standing down. Slowly, suspiciously, but undeniably, until the whole galaxy watched two ancient enemies halt their weapons. Jake ended the broadcast with, "Thanks. Please don't blow anything up. I haven't finished my coffee." He tapped his comm off and smiled. Vextera collapsed into a chair. "Oh, spirits," she whispered. "He's doing diplomacy. Real diplomacy. Terrifying diplomacy. Human diplomacy." And the war wasn't just pausing. It was unraveling. Right there, right then. Because one human finally said out loud, what everyone else ignored for 47 years, for a moment, the galaxy held perfectly still. Two armadas, each powerful enough to scorch continents, hovered at the edge of a diplomatic station. Their engines growled with barely contained aggression. Their weapons arrays glowed, primed and trembling. Countless soldiers waited behind triggers, fingers hovering with the restless tension of veterans who'd spent a lifetime fighting the same enemy. And in the center of it all stood Jake Murphy, former kindergarten teacher, human, bodyguard, coffee enthusiast. He stared at the massive holographic display showing both fleets, sipped his drink, and said, "Well, this seems unnecessarily stressful." Ambassador Vextera nearly passed out. General Crixton and Hive Queen Melodia stood frozen on opposite sides of the room, each clearly torn between terror and disbelief. Neither had intended for this to spiral so far so fast. But in a galaxy where fear dictated every action, momentum was almost impossible to stop. And yet Jake had slowed it, just with a broadcast and a calm voice. But slowing wasn't enough. They needed to end this. Right now. Melodia's crystalline form shifted with anxiety, her drones pulsing in anxious colors. Our fleets require explicit, synchronized orders. If one side hesitates, the other will interpret it as betrayal. Crixton grunted, "And my commanders will not stand down while they see your ships armed." "Your ships are armed," Melodia snapped, "and yours are pointed at my flagship, because you primed your cannons." "No," Jay clapped. Once. Loudly. Both leaders instinctively shut up. "Okay," he said, in the exact same tone used to break up 5-year-olds fighting over crayons. "This is clearly not working. You're talking at each other, not to each other. So let's try something new." Vextera whispered, "Spirits have mercy." Because she felt it. Something was shifting. Jake had a confidence he hadn't shown before. Not arrogance. Something gentler. A calm, grounded authority. He stepped to the center of the room, set his coffee on the table, and looked at both leaders as if they were simply confused parents at a school meeting. Let's do this the human way. Melodia flickered with uncertainty. What does that mean? It means, Jake said, we're going to talk like adults. No posturing, no threats, no history lessons, just honesty. Crixton growled in skepticism. Humans handle conflict through honesty? Jake shrugged. Well, sometimes we yell. Sometimes we eat ice cream. Sometimes we talk it out. It depends on the day. But today, we talk. He gestured to 2 chairs. Sit. Both leaders stared. Jake didn't raise a weapon, didn't shout, didn't intimidate. He just waited. And somehow, impossibly, they sat. Vextra nearly fell over. The galaxy's 2 most feared war leaders, who had never backed down from each other in nearly 5 decades, obeyed a human who still had crumbs from his sandwich on his shirt. Jake reclaimed his coffee. Great, he said. Now listen carefully. I'm going to ask a question, and I want you to answer honestly. No diplomacy, just truth. Melodia tilted her head. We will attempt this truth. Good, Jake said. Here's the question. What do you actually want? Silence. Then Crixton blinked. Victory. Jake raised an eyebrow. What? To secure Zephyrian resources and protect our people. Jake turned to Melodia. And you? Melodia's form pulsed faintly. Safety. Territory for our nesting colonies. And justice. Jake smiled gently. So, the same basic things. Food, land, security. Survival. Both leaders froze. Jake continued quietly, but with a firmness that stunned the entire room. Look, every species wants the same things. Humans too. We want to protect our families. Have space to live. Not starve. Not be attacked. You're not enemies because you're different. You're enemies because you never talked long enough to realize you want the same things. Melodia's drones dimmed. Crixton's fists slowly unclenched. Jake leaned forward. What if you worked together instead of against each other? The words hung suspended in the air. Together, Melodia whispered. Partners, Jake said. You share resources. You share space. You combine strengths. He pointed at Crixton. You handle mining better than anyone. Then, at Melodia. You cultivate energy and crystal growth better than anyone. He spread his hands. Why not do both? As allies, not enemies. Vextra felt a jolt of electricity through her chest. This wasn't negotiation. This was revelation. The leaders just stared at Jake, as if seeing something they'd never considered. Crixton spoke first. Slowly, our mining operations could benefit from crystalline energy stewardship. Melodia added tentatively, and our nesting colonies could prosper if provided stable protected zones. Jake grinned. Exactly. You're stronger together. The galaxy is big enough for both of you. It was happening. The impossible. The irreversible. The long-delayed. The war was unraveling at the emotional seam where it had always lived. Not in politics or strategy, but in fear. And Jake was cutting through that fear with the simplest, oldest human tool in existence. Conversation. But the fleets outside didn't know that. They only saw 2 war armadas preparing to strike. Harmony Station shuddered again as long-range sensors blared warnings. Crixton's commander broadcast urgently. General, crystalline destroyers charging primary resonance cannons. Melodia's own comms flared. Hive Queen, Zephyrian cruisers locking onto our carriers. Jake swore softly under his breath. Okay, time to wrap this up. He stepped between the 2 leaders, literally positioned his soft, squishy human body in the line of their projected holographic fleet displays. Both of you, he said, call off the attack. Right now. At the same time. Crixton hesitated. Melodia flickered with doubt. And then Jake said something Vextra would remember for the rest of her life. Please. Not a demand. Not a threat. Not a command. A simple, human, heartfelt please. It disarmed the room more effectively than any weapon. Crixton reached for his calm. Melodia mirrored him at the exact same moment. 2 voices went out simultaneously across 2 massive war fleets. Stand down. Death cannons powered down. Engines cooled. Shields dropped from combat mode to neutral. And across the galaxy, history changed. All because Jake asked politely. The shockwave of realization spread from the fleets to the leaders to the entire station. They'd done it. Not after months of negotiation. Not after years of planning. But in 3 minutes. 3 simple, ridiculous, miraculous human minutes. Jake Murphy took a final sip of his coffee and set the cup down with a satisfied sigh. So, he said, does anyone want to apologize for the whole 47 years of blowing each other up? Or should I draw straws? Vexter's legs gave out from pure emotional overload. Melodia and Crixton exchanged a long, deep look, one that finally held no hatred. Hive Queen Melodia spoke first. The Confederation apologizes for our preemptive strikes. General Crixton bowed his head. The Zephyrian Empire apologizes for violating sacred nesting grounds. Jake clapped softly. Great teamwork. Proud of you. Vextera covered her face. Because she knew, without question, that this moment would spread across the galaxy. Historians would study it. Diplomats would debate it. Generations would remember it. Not as a treaty, not as a negotiation, but as the day a human walked into a war and ended it faster than he could finish his morning coffee. The galaxy hadn't known silence in 47 years. Not the diplomatic kind. Not the strategic kind. Not the eerie, weapons-cooling, ceasefire kind. This was different. This was the silence of an entire star network pausing mid-breath, stunned into stillness by the absurd, impossible, wildly unbelievable truth. A human, a bodyguard, a man who packed snacks and asked for coffee, had ended a war. Within 3 minutes. Vextera watched the news feeds flood Harmony Station, each headline louder than the last. Human ends war with common sense. Deathworld diplomacy successful. Zeprians and Crystallins sign peace offer, thanks to terrifying human. Every species reacted differently. Some celebrated. Some panicked. Some fainted. Most simply stared at their screens, wondering whether this was a dream, a glitch, or a cosmic prank. Jake Murphy, the man in question, sat in the station cafeteria eating a sandwich that looked like it was actively trying to escape the bread. So, he said between bites, "Big day, huh?" Vextera stared at him in exhausted awe. "Jake, you ended a war." Jake shrugged. "I didn't end a war. They ended the war. I just helped them talk." "You terrified them into talking." "Terrified?" Jake frowned. "Why?" "I was being friendly." Vextera pressed 2 hands to her temples. "That's the problem." Before Jake could reply, the cafeteria doors slid open and reporters burst in, an overwhelming wave of drones, cameras, microphones, blinking lights, and frantic appendages. They attacked Jake like a hyperswarm of curious insects. "Mr. Murphy, how did you do it? Is it true humans view war as a negotiation tactic? Do you consume the bones of your enemies? Is coffee a human weapon? Are there more of you?" Jake choked on his sandwich. "Whoa, everyone calm down. I'm not a weapon. I'm just a guy." That only made them more terrified. One tentacled reporter whispered to another, "He says he's just a guy. That implies there are millions like him." A crystalline journalist trembled. The galaxy is not prepared for millions. Jake raised both hands. No, we're harmless. Mostly. I mean, some humans are spicy, but..." Vextera grabbed his shoulder. "Stop explaining." But it was too late. A reporter shoved a recorder at him. "Mr. Murphy, what message do you have for galactic civilizations still at war?" Jake blinked. Maybe talk to each other first? I mean, don't start shooting until you've, communicated. Wars are messy. Communication is cheaper." The reporters gasped. "He advocates for psychological warfare. He threatens entire nations with conversation. He suggests wars are messy. What horrors has he seen?" Jake looked helplessly at Vextera. "Am I doing this wrong?" She sighed. "No, you're doing it very humanly." An hour later, Jake and Vextera finally escaped the mob, retreating into a quiet observation deck overlooking the neutral zone. The stars glowed softly beyond the transparent hull, peaceful for the first time in decades. Jake leaned back in his chair. "This place is beautiful. I've never been off Earth before. Didn't think my first trip would involve all that." Vextera looked at him, thoughtfully. You don't understand, do you? Understand what? How terrifying you are. Jake laughed. Me? Terrifying? I don't even kill bugs. I just release them outside. That is what terrifies us. Jake blinked. What? Vexthera gestured at the stars. You ended a war without weapons, threats, bargaining chips, or negotiation strategies. You used coffee, and logic, and politeness. Jake shrugged. Well, yelling didn't seem helpful. Exactly. You chose empathy. She leaned forward slightly. Jake, most species fear what they cannot predict. Humans are impossible to predict. 1 minute you're friendly. The next minute you're climbing mountains with apex predators. And the next minute you're discussing global conflicts like weather patterns. You say terrifying things calmly, casually, like you're talking about lunch. Jake frowned, thinking it over. I guess humans are adaptable. That word is too small, Vexthera whispered. You change environments. You survive impossible things. And you don't even realize it. Jake looked uncertain. I'm not special. No, Vexthera agreed. You're typical, and that is what frightens the galaxy. Jake opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded slowly. Okay, that's fair. A quiet moment passed before he asked, so what happens now? Vexthera smiled, her 4 eyes glowing gently. Now, the galaxy pretends nothing happened. The Zephyrians will claim strategic wisdom. The Crystallins will claim diplomatic brilliance. And every species will rewrite history to hide the fact that a human kindergarten teacher solved a war they couldn't. Jake grinned. Nice. But, she continued, your name will spread anyway. Stories will mutate. Legends will form. The galaxy will whisper about the human who ended a war in 3 minutes. Jake winced. That sounds dramatic. It is, Vexthera said, and also accurate. While they spoke, transmissions flooded the station from every direction. The Regellian Trade Union requesting Jake's help resolving a 73-year economic stalemate. The Centauri border clans offering lifetime citizenship if he mediated their disputes. The Vegano-Micron philosophers wanting him to decide the outcome of a 400-year argument about the purpose of existence. A minor warlord asking if Jake would yell at her enemies. Vexthera's communicator nearly melted from notifications. Jake lifted an eyebrow. Are they serious? Terrifyingly so. Jake scratched his head. Okay, but I can't do all that. I mean, I'm on vacation, and I wanted to check out the zero-gravity gardens. Vexthera closed her eyes. Yes, that is precisely what I feared. Jake yawned. Well, I guess I'll take a walk. Maybe grab another coffee. Maybe stop a couple small wars by accident if I run into any. You know, whatever. Jake. Vexthera nearly screamed. No more war ending until further notice. Please. Jake nodded solemnly. I'll try. She stared. Try. Well, yeah. I can't control who starts talking to me. If someone brings up their problems, it'd be rude not to help. Vexthera buried her face in her hands. The galaxy is doomed. Jake laughed softly. Nah, it'll be fine. They'll figure things out. Maybe humans can help teach everyone how to chill. He stood up, stretched, and slipped his backpack on. Okay, I'm off to explore. If I find any conflicts, I'll, walk away. Walk fast, Vexthera corrected. Deal. He waved and walked toward the corridor with casual, oblivious confidence. And as Vexthera watched him disappear around the corner, she wondered how something so harmless-looking could change the future of civilizations. Because Jake Murphy, human, bodyguard, teacher, accidental diplomat, had done in minutes what empires failed to do in half a century. He didn't negotiate. He didn't strategize. He didn't threaten. He simply talked, and the galaxy would never recover from it. Later, in bars and ships and starports across 1,000 worlds, a legend began to grow. They called him the Warmond in disguise, the diplomatic doom of war, the soft-spoken deathworld diplomat, the coffee-bearing peace-bringer. But Jake, he was just looking for the station's best cup of coffee. And somewhere, across a dozen systems, conflicts paused nervously, just in case the human happened to be walking their way.